Maybe I'm heartless. I know, the rest of you are probably thinking, you just thought of that. Today we're looking at Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. Welcome back to the crypt. As per usual, this is another Audible. I can't confirm or deny whether or not the Audible differs from a physical copy of the book, so take that how you will. But we are going to go ahead and get into the official summary on Audible of the book. So what is Wicked Fox about? 18-year-old Gu Myung has a secret. She's a gumiho, a nine-tailed fox who must devour the energy of men in order to survive. Because so few believe in the old tales anymore, and with so many evil men no one will miss, the modern city of Seoul is the perfect place to hide and hunt. But after feeding one full moon, Myung crosses paths with Ji-hoon, a human boy being attacked by a goblin deep in the forest. Against her better judgment, she violates the rules of survival to rescue the boy, losing her fox speed, her gumiho soul, in the process. Ji-hoon knows Myung is more than just a beautiful girl. He saw her nine tails the night she saved his life. His grandmother used to tell him stories of the gumiho, of their power and the danger they pose to men. He's drawn to her anyway. When he finds her fox speed, he does not realize he holds her life in her hands. Let's get into the characters, because as y'all know, I am a very character-driven reader as well as writer, and I will say that Myung is a pretty solid main character, actually. I didn't feel like she pulled too strongly one way or another. At first, I was initially concerned she'd be like the strong character who that's her thing and she doesn't have anything else. But pretty early on, you start seeing a lot of cracks in that, a lot of the vulnerability, especially when she's around her mother, where she just doesn't feel powerful enough. She doesn't feel like enough in general. You really sense a lot of sadness from her with her relationship with her mother pretty early on, which I think was wonderfully handled. And so thankfully, that fear that she's just strong for the sake of being strong and that her flaws are pretty insignificant compared to that did not come true. We do see the fact that she longs to have friendship, she longs to have connection, but has no capacity for how to do that. Doesn't know how to do relationship boundaries. Like, we see all of that play out, and I think that was actually pretty well done, especially the relationship with her mother. On the topic of mothers, though, Myung's mother, who is more monstrous in terms of how she handles things in the world, interestingly enough, we see her as a sympathetic character by the end, which I wasn't sure how they were going to pull that off. I really, especially at the midway point of the book, I was like, how are they going to make me, because they need to make me sympathetic to the mother figure. I felt like they needed to, and at first I was like, are they just going to cut off the mother as like evil? And I was really concerned about that, but they didn't. And I was thoroughly impressed by that aspect. That being said, this is a romance. So we do have a love interest, Ji-hoon, but I really had a hard time connecting to Ji-hoon as a character, which is a shame because I'll get into structure a little bit later, but we kind of have a lot of split chapters where we get a lot of Ji-hoon, and I actually found a lot of Ji-hoon's chapters to be more boring. I mean, he is the human character, so, but it wasn't boring because he was a human, it was because of who he was. So Ji-hoon as a character really lacks any kind of drive. He doesn't really seem to have any clear idea of his life purpose or what he wants. This is a problem I have with a lot of characters, especially love interest characters, because they kind of become their life purpose becomes their love interest, which I kind of despise. Like, what does he want out of life outside of that? And near the tail end, when the stakes are raised, he wants, family to get better. He doesn't want them to leave him and like stuff like that, but it's harder to see the fall of a character and then change priorities when I don't know what his original priority was. The love interest aspect of this story was supposed to be so much bigger, and it was supposed to really draw you in. But I found the most compelling relationship in the story to be between both characters and their mothers, their individual mothers. Because Ji-hoon also has an extremely strained relationship with his mother, which I think was actually handled very well by the end, by the way. Again, I feel like the relationships between the children and their parents were handled so much better than the relationship between the two love interests to each other. Let's bring up the world itself and how it functions, because that definitely changed how the characters function together. So the world is an urban fantasy, although I felt it did lean very heavily on the urban side. The fantasy element is there for sure, and you interact with it a lot. However, I felt like how the fantasy world interferes with the main world, the urban setting, we don't see a lot of that, really. And I thought I would see more of it, especially considering how it starts. It starts out with Myung on a hunt, and we really don't see a hunt again for the rest of the book. Closest we get is 2 instances in school where Myung shows a little bit too much strength and it looks weird, but heavy consequences for that don't really hit. It's not a bad thing. It's just not what I expected when I first started reading it. I will say I appreciate how they kept the world small, on the small scale. We really don't know about the bigger grand scheme of things. It felt like there was more of a society in terms of the mythological creatures and how they operated, but we really don't understand fully how that works. And we're never told because the story stays focused to its main cast, which is pretty small. Okay, speaking of the cast and it staying focused, the structure of this was third-person point of view. I personally like that. I will say, though, it did switch perspectives, like how it focused between the 2 main leads. The structure was solid, though, in terms of like how it switched. I was usually could tell who was being focused on because it was third person, not first person. As far as theme goes, that was pretty solid. It was about trusting others and forgiveness from pain, which remained complex, which I appreciated. I appreciated that the relationship, again, the star of the show was the relationship between the teens and their moms. And that was handled so well, and it was handled in a complex manner, which I appreciate. So overall, if you couldn't tell, I actually really liked this book. I think the only huge criticism I would have, outside of the romance not quite being my thing, was the fact that there was a lot of talking. The pacing for the book was a little slow in parts. There was a lot of talking, a lot less action. So it was very dialogue heavy, very... If you've ever watched a lot of K-dramas, you'll understand what I mean by like just so much dialogue between characters talking about stuff, talking about feelings, but not necessarily acting on them, per se. It's a lot of romance, but if you're used to those kind of dramas, I do think you'll really, really like this, because I do think those parts are handled well, and they're correct for the romance. There are action sequences, don't get me wrong. There are action sequences in this book. They're about 3 decent action sequences. There are these huge lulls of inaction. If you're prepared for that, I think you will like this. For me, it just was a little sluggish in a few places. I mean, stuff was happening, but it just felt a little sluggish. That's just me and my personal preference. It was still a great read. I do recommend it if you're interested in looking into it. I don't see a lot of people talking about this book, which I think is a shame, because I do think the relationship stuff was done well. Yeah, let me know if you've read this book, what you thought about it, if you're interested in reading it. I'll leave all relative links to this book if you want to purchase it down below in the description box. I really like that mother-child relationship. I wish there's more of that in the genre, because when it's done well, it's so good. But you gotta do well.